Good morning, everybody. Glad to be with you, at least in video form, and hopefully you got here all right and you're having a good morning so far. What I want to do is take you through our passage and show you some of the incredible things that are there. If you remember last week, the premise of what we talked about last week is in terms of attraction is oftentimes defined by, at least the most common way that we define attraction is by what we see, and we limit it to just the physical. And that is clear from the bride at the very beginning. She looks at herself and she says, I'm not very attractive, and she's only seeing herself just by the externals. And it's not until the end of the passage where the king, the one who is in love with her, the one who can read her soul, begins to make her see that she is completely desirable inside and out. To him, she is the most beautiful, desirable thing on the planet. And what we concluded with last week is how interesting it is that once we see ourselves through the eyes of the king is when we begin to understand our true worth and value. And so that was last week. What we're going to talk about, this morning in Song of Solomon chapter 2, we're going to start in verse 4, and we're going to go all the way through chapter 3, ending at verse 5. So we're going to look at that whole section there. Just a note on that, maybe why aren't we just sticking with a chapter? Because the way that it was numbered out, again, the original chapters and verses headings were not in the original text. And so just the flow of, you have to look at the flow of the scripture and what it says to understand or to be able to capture what's really going on. And remember, this is not a narrative, this is a song. This is a story told in song poetic form. And so in order to really grasp what's going on, we can't always just rely on, sometimes we can, but not always rely on the chapter and verse headings. So we're going to be starting at verse 4, chapter 2, verse 4, and we'll go through chapter 3, verse 5. There's two things that we're going to be looking at this morning, and maybe you want to write these down. The first one is the desire to express love. There's something about our sexuality, there's something about the way that God has wired us in that we have a desire to express our love for other people. Or specifically, in this case, what we're going to see in the text, for a spouse. So there's the desire to express love, but then with the desire to express love, there is a necessity to protect love. So a desire to protect love and a desire to express love and a necessity to protect love. So let's take a look at this together and see what is going on in the life of our couple. So she begins, chapter 2, verse 4. She says, "He brought me to the banqueting house, and his banner over me was love." And we can assume that that she has been brought to, when it says he's brought me to the banqueting house, maybe this is like first date, maybe this is first time he's bringing her home, maybe it's second or third, maybe she's been there a lot, but she is with him in the banqueting house, in a place where there's lots of other people there. So maybe it's a formal state dinner, maybe it is just a collection of family and friends. Whatever it is, there's a banquet happening. He's brought her home. I love the fact that this is not like a secret affair, but Solomon and his future bride desire for their relationship to be out in the open. How dangerous it is when we try to hide from other people, when we try to hide from our friends and family, maybe a romantic interest or maybe someone that we love. Solomon and his bride desire to keep things out in the open. There's a lot of integrity here. So she says, "He brought me to the banqueting house, and his banner over me was love." Now, this banner was like not like a banner that you printed out from like a dot matrix printer. Remember those from back in the 80s and such? Some of you may not, but we're talking about a banner, like a wartime banner. So armies would go off to war, and obviously this is before digital communications, but in order to know where your army or where your commander was, they would have large, colorful banners so that you could see where kind of home base was, and you could and it declared, "This is King David's army," or "This is Solomon's army," or "This is whoever, this is their army." She says, "His banner over me is love." It is clear to everyone at the banquet, it is clear to everyone around that Solomon is in love with this woman, and she sees it and she feels it, and she's comforted by that. But then she says in verse 5, this is kind of in soliloquy, but in verse 5 she says, "Sustain me with raisins, refresh me with apples, for I am sick with love." The love that she has for him, it's making her, it's kind of like making her weak at the knees, and she's saying, I'm being affected by my love for him, by my desire for him. And so I need, raisins, apples. These are, for us, we know these are quick carbohydrates. You can, the sugar's digested quickly, and you can bring some sugar back into your body. She's got the shakes. And not because she's scared, not because she's nervous, not because she's pressured, but because she is experiencing the love and desiring to show the love. Now, this couple's not married yet, and and we'll see even more in verse 6, she has a desire to express her love to Solomon. Especially, look at this, verse 6. She says, "His left hand is under my head, and his right hand embraces me." Now picture that for a moment. How could his left hand be under her head and his right hand be embracing her? Well, I don't know if I can show it on the video here, but she is imagining in her mind, she is expressing a desire for him and her to be able to make love. Imagine that for a moment. In a lot of our conservative Christianity mindset, we pretend that we're not even allowed to. We pretend that sexuality is like this extra thing that it's kind of like a. You remember from a couple of weeks ago, for a long time, sexuality in the church was just seen as kind of this necessary evil. It wasn't celebrated. It wasn't something that was supposed to be even talked about. You weren't supposed to really desire sex. That was the pagans. That was the unbelievers. But clearly, from what she's saying here, and right now we have a picture that this is a godly woman, that she has a desire to make love to Solomon, and that's not a bad thing. And no, they're not married yet, but it's not wrong for her to desire to express her love to Solomon in a physical way. We'll talk more about this in the coming weeks, but she's displaying this desire. That is a natural thing. To make love to a spouse or to make love to someone that you love is a natural desire. Now, should it always be acted upon? No, of course not. We believe the Bible teaches that sex is best inside the confines of a covenant marriage. But the desire to do so is not something that's sinful, especially as a relationship continues to move along and mature. And any of us who are married and remember the months and the weeks leading up to the actual wedding day, that desire only grows more and more and more. And she's just saying, I desire to make love to Solomon, for him to make love to me, that for us to share this. Again, we'll talk more about just the purpose of expressing love physically in the coming weeks, but that's what she desires. Now listen to what she says though in verse 7. She says, this is the first of, I think, 3 times she says this. Verse 7, "I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles or the does of the field, that you not stir up or awaken love until it pleases." Now, what's her warning here? She's warning her friends. She's warning the women that have been around her. She says, don't stir up or awaken love until it pleases. Meaning, desire is one thing, but be very careful, because that desire can take you into places that you don't want to be, or take you into places that you may regret. Why? Because sexual intimacy, sexual desire is a strong desire. You could even argue, we might even in the coming weeks make the argument that it is the strongest urge within the human body, the human mind, the human person, which clearly you can see from pieces in our culture, which again we'll talk about more. But this is what she's saying: don't stir the pot until you're ready to eat. Don't awaken. Don't even go down a road if you're not in a position to go down that road. So that's what she's saying. Again, the desire for sexual expression is not evil or wrong. Where we get into trouble, which we'll talk about more, but where we get into trouble is when we're not ready, which is what she's saying, when it's the wrong time for that sexual expression. So then she begins to, in verse 8, she begins to just, again in soliloquy, speak about her love, about Solomon. As she says in verse 8, "The voice of my beloved, behold, he comes, leaping over the mountains, bounding over the hills. My beloved is like a gazelle or a young stag. Behold, there he stands behind our wall, gazing through the windows, looking through the lattice." She's saying, my man is coming to, ready? He's pursuing me. All right. She says that he's looking through the windows, through the lattice. She uses the image of like a stag, like jumping over the mountains. Solomon is pursuing her. He's not just sitting at home going, well, hey, baby, text me, then maybe we'll hang out. No, he's a gentleman. He is a strong man. He is a gabor. Remember that word from our study in Ruth and Boaz? He's a strong man. He is pursuing her. He wants her to know, you interest me. You attract me. You have ignited my pursuit. And so he's going after her, and she notices that. Just a little side note, this is a big deal, not only for her, but also just for all of us in general. Women desire to be pursued. They want to know that they are desirable. They want to know that they're attractive. It's just is it a generalization? Of course it is, but it seems to be true. Before marriage and after marriage. Fellas who are married, your wife wants you to continue to pursue her. And for the men, which we'll see in a little bit, and again throughout, we're going to see it again in chapter 5, men want to know that their pursuit is appreciated. They want to know that their pursuit is seen and acknowledged. So she says in verse 10, "My beloved speaks to me." So now Solomon is going to speak, and he says, "Arise, my love, my beautiful one, and come away. For behold, the winter is past, the flowers appear on the earth. The time of singing has come, and the voice of the turtle dove is heard in our land. The fig tree ripens its figs, and the vines are in blossom. They give forth their fragrance. Arise, my love, my beautiful one, and come away." He's beckoning her. He's leading her. He's saying, I want you to come with me. I want you to follow after me. I want you to be with me. He's not just saying, hey, if you want to hang out. I mean, and this is I saw this a lot in student ministries and young adult ministry, where there's this mentality of there's no commitment, or there's a declining commitment in relationships. Like young people are not knowing how to date, how to pursue, how to be in committed relationship. It's just like, hey, well, if you're not doing anything Friday night, maybe we can hang out. Maybe if there's something cool, we can go do it. Not like, no, which Solomon here is saying, no, I want to be with you. I'm going to pursue you. You have my attention. You are the one that my heart desires. Verse 14, "O my dove, in the clefts of the rock, in the crannies of the cliff, let me see your face, let me hear your voice, for your voice is sweet and your face is lovely." He's saying, I want us to go to our secret place. I want us to go to our place of solitude. I want to be with you. I want to spend time with you. You draw me in. You draw me to yourself. There is an incredible desire to express love. Now, let's skip verse 15 for just a moment and jump over to verse 16 and 17. She says, "My beloved is mine, and I am his. He grazes among the lilies until the day breathes and the shadows flee. Turn, my beloved, be like a gazelle or a young stag on cleft mountains." Now, some of your Bibles might say mountains of separation. In verse 17, she goes way into imagery here. And what she's saying when she says, turn, be like a gazelle or a young stag on cleft mountains, or be like a young stag on mountains of separation, what almost all commentators agree upon is that she's talking about the mountains of separation are her breasts. And she is saying to Solomon, I want you to be able to touch me. I want us to be able to express our love physically. Now this is not the most this is not going to be the most descriptive of their physical relationship. That'll come in chapter 4 and chapter 6, I believe, chapter 5, excuse me. But she's saying, I desire to express love physically. That's not a wrong thing. And the reason why I keep saying that over and over again is because I want us to get away from the classic conservative Christian mindset that sex is like some necessary evil that God created so that we could have babies. He created it for our enjoyment. He created sexuality not just to make babies, but for as a physical expression that creates a spiritual unity. We'll talk about that more next week. She says, now look at chapter 3. We'll go back to verse 15 in a moment, but look at chapter 3, verse 1. Now she's gonna tell Solomon, or she's gonna tell her girls about a dream. She says, on my bed by night, I sought him whom my soul loves. Now this is a dream. She's remembering a dream. I sought him, but found him not. I will rise now and go about the city, in the streets and in the squares. I will seek him whom my soul loves. I sought him, but found him not. The watchmen found me, and they went about as they went about in the city. Have you seen him whom my soul loves? Scarcely had I passed them when I found him whom my soul loves. I held him, and I would not let him go until I had brought him into my mother's house and into the chamber of her who conceived me. She's having this dream. The urge is becoming stronger and stronger. Now, I'll just tell you, next week they're going to get married. So they are getting closer and closer to their wedding day. There's no proposal in here, but they are, the next verse in Song of Solomon chapter 3, verse 6 is their wedding day, or it starts the wedding ceremony. But you clearly see here this celebration of love, this celebration of physical intimacy. There is a desire to express physical love, or to express love physically. It's there, it's natural, it's in the pages of Scripture. We ought to celebrate it. We ought to, and as we'll see right here, we ought to also protect it. Now go back to chapter 2, verse 15. I'm going a little bit over, so I'll go quickly here. She says, in fact, it's not clear who says this, so we could say that they're both saying this, or they're both agreeing to this. But the wording here is, catch the foxes for us, the little foxes that spoil the vineyards, for our vineyards are in blossom. Now, this is incredibly descriptive here. And let's start at the last line. It says, for our vineyards are in blossom. Remember, the word vineyard in this text is regularly used to describe their sexuality, to describe their sexual desire, to describe what they can give sexually. And she says, or he says, our vineyards are in blossom. They are about to bear fruit. So we are right there. And they say, but what we need to do is catch the foxes for us, the little foxes that spoil the vineyards. The point here is this, that in vineyards in ancient times and even today, the foxes would run through the vineyard and they would pick the grapes off and completely destroy it. And just by jumping up, by scratching, entire vineyards could be ruined by these little foxes. And she says, we need to catch, or again, we don't know who exactly says it, we need to catch the foxes. We need to, anything, and again, these are not literal foxes, but her point is, anything that's going to ruin this beautiful thing that we are anticipating and excited about expressing for each other, anything that is going to come between us, we need to catch and get rid of. We need to eradicate. And in terms of sexuality, in terms of sexual desire and intimate and romantic intimacy, there's a whole list of things that which we're going to talk about in just a moment, or you guys in your tables are going to talk about. There's a whole list of things, but the command here, or the imperative here, is we need to catch them, because it's implied they're there. They're at the corner of the vineyard. We've got to get them. It's interesting, God in the garden, God creates this incredible, beautiful garden for Adam and Eve, and yet there is danger. The serpent is there to draw them into temptation. What God creates as beautiful and perfect and for the benefit of a human being, the enemy will take and distort and destroy and will confuse and bleed away the blessing and the grace that God has poured into it. And it's not just sexuality, it's our jobs, it's our work, it's our families, it's going to church, it's worship, anything you can think of. What God has created to be good, the enemy will take and desires to take and destroy. And so they say, catch the foxes. And again, go back to, now skip over again to chapter 3. She says again, here's the second time, she says again in chapter 3, verse 5, I adjure you, O daughters of Jerusalem, by the gazelles or the does of the field, that you not stir up or awaken love until it pleases. So you have here in chapter 2, verse 7, in chapter 2, verse 15, and chapter 3, verse 5, you have 3 warnings of the possibility of disaster, of the possibility of ruin within the context of expressing love physically. You have this incredible desire that God has given to human beings, which is natural and good, and yet there is always the possibility for destruction, the possibility of fall. Now I'll say this, before I close, I'll say this. Not only we have this desire to express love physically, and we have this necessity to protect it. And even within that, within that context, especially of a necessity to protect it, we would all be fools if we thought that that as long as we have this desire to do good, we'll always do good, or as long as we have this desire to follow God's plan, nothing bad will ever happen. I would venture to say that many of us in our group, and I would say most, if not all Christians in some way, have taken the gift of sexuality and have distorted it in some way, just because of our sin nature, or it's been distorted for us because either we were deceived or we were taken advantage of, something happened to us that was outside of our control. I'll say this as I close. I'm 2 minutes over. No matter what we've done in our past, no matter what has been done to us, this beautiful gift, listen to me, this beautiful gift of sexuality, this desire to express it in a beautiful and holy way, can be redeemed. And no matter what we've done, no matter how far we've gone, no matter what has been done to us, God in His grace is powerful enough, is wonderful enough, is loving enough to restore us so that we can again receive this gift of our sexuality and have a right desire to express it in the right way, in the way that, as Tim Keller puts it, brings about the most flourishing. So that's the text that that I wanted to unpack for you this morning. You're going to be getting in your tables and going through some discussion. Thank you for letting me be away. I'm pretty sure this is the last time I'm going to be away for a long time, but you never know. I love you guys. We'll see you next week. Bye.